this part really triggered me as well. Rogan and Trump both say that Kamala shouldn't have picked Tim Walz because, again, Trump's a partisan hack who's running on the other side. Obviously, he's going to say that. But Rogan, his ecosystem, his media diet, his friend group, right wing, right wing, right wing. And so he thinks like, well, what do you mean? I saw some videos on Twitter of Tim Walz moving in an effeminate fashion. So obviously, she shouldn't have picked this guy. This guy was a bad pick.
Hey, everybody. This is Troy over at Uncomfortable Truths. Thanks for checking me out. Now, today we've got to talk about Kyle Kulinski because the dude is having an absolute meltdown. After Joe Rogan interviewed Donald Trump, Kyle Kulinski decided that he was going to throw an absolute fit because Joe Rogan didn't ask Donald Trump the exact questions that Kyle thinks he should have been asked. And honestly, ever since Kyle dyed his hair, there's basically no way to tell the difference between him and any of the anchors on MSNBC.
There were moments where I was like, how is Rogan actually saying things worse than Trump? It was incredible.
The Trump derangement syndrome coming from Kyle Kulinski is absolutely wild, especially when you consider the fact that, let's keep it real, he's pretty much urging people to go out and support Kamala Harris to make sure that Donald Trump isn't elected, which is crazy because he is out there saying that, yeah, well, Kamala Harris may be supporting a genocide. I don't really like that Kamala Harris was a cop. I don't really support any of her policies. He says that one day, and then the next day he goes, well, yeah, but she doesn't want to actually go ahead and tax your tips. That's something that Kamala Harris is going to be great on. So which is it? Is she a liar who's supporting a genocide, or is she somebody that we can trust to make sure that her policies aren't going to wreck Americans? Well, I think we know the answer to that because her and Biden are in charge right now, right this second. So if you're dissatisfied with the way things are, you know exactly who to blame. It would be them. But Kyle Kulinski isn't honest about these things. And so instead, he literally just goes out and throws a fit because Joe Rogan didn't ask the exact questions that he wanted him to ask. And he completely ignores the fact that maybe Americans actually want to see somebody talk to Donald Trump like a human being and watch how he interacts in a regular conversation with a regular guy. And that's what happened. But go ahead and take a look at what Kyle Kulinski's saying because his fit is absolutely childish.
It was honestly a humiliating interview is the best way to describe it. So before I get to the point for point, topic for topic breakdown of exactly what happened and what was said, let me tell you what wasn't asked about. So what wasn't asked about is Israel in the midst of Israel committing a genocide and the U.S. arming and funding Israel to commit that genocide, and Donald Trump saying, the problem with that policy is we're not arming and funding them enough, and we're not supporting them enough. He wants to put the genocide into hyperdrive. That was not asked about. Roe versus Wade was not asked about. The fake elector slates was not asked about. His war crimes were not asked about. His corruption was not asked about. His 91 criminal charges was not asked about. His relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which an article just came out this week saying they were besties and they had a sexual assault game that they played together. And a woman who was a model in 1993 came out and told a very detailed story, which, by the way, fits with Trump's MO completely, the whole grab him by the pussy thing, right? She tells this detailed story about how Trump did that, and Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were buddy-buddy, and there was this weird game that they played where Epstein would bring a woman to Trump, Trump would assault that woman, then afterwards Epstein would act mad about it, and it was a little tee-hee-hee, look at us doing our little fucking sexual assault game. I think if that story came out about any Democrat, Joe Rogan would be talking about it on his podcast endlessly and not bringing on the Democrats who were accused to fucking giggle with them, right?
Here's the thing. I don't even disagree with everything Kyle just said. It would be fantastic to have Trump sit down for an interview for 3 hours and only talk about tariffs, or 3 hours and only talk about foreign policy. But Joe Rogan has a podcast where they talk about a number of issues, and he asked a lot of really great questions during the interview. And Kyle points out other questions that certainly could have been asked and would have been fair game. Then he decides to go off on some tangent where somebody makes an accusation that has not been proven, and Kyle just runs with it as if this is an exact proven fact. It isn't. That's not true. but that doesn't matter to Kyle Kulinski because he's fine running with any sort of accusation without evidence as long as it's against Donald Trump, because he's not trying to tell people the truth. He's just trying to push a narrative. And what is happening right now in the mainstream media and what Kyle is regurgitating is, oh, there was an accusation. We have to take it seriously. And he does it again, and he's parroting the media's talking points where they're saying Trump's basically Hitler.
Joe says the media loves to take things out of context and compare you to Hitler. This is happening the exact same week that a story comes out from, this is now the third top administration official of Trump's, who's a conservative Republican, who has come out and said, yeah, this guy's a fascist to the core. There are three top administration officials, two generals and one chief of staff, who've come out and said, yeah, he's a fascist. And the chief of staff, John Kelly, came out this week and said, Trump would bring up, hey, why can't you be like the German generals? And he was like, what do you mean, the Kaiser's generals? Like, who? Like, what are you talking about? And Trump would basically be like, no, the Nazi generals. So maybe the comparison to Hitler is being made because Trump brought up Hitler and somebody is objectively and soberly reporting on what was said. Maybe that. The idea that it's like made up out of whole cloth. That, oh, yeah, we're all just going to compare Donald Trump to Hitler for shits and giggles. No, there's actually a logical thread. And if Joe followed these stories, he would know that. And he wouldn't make himself look so ridiculous by, oh, they like to compare you to Hitler. No, Trump is the one who brought up Hitler to his chief of staff, and his chief of staff warned us about that. Just like Mark Milley and one other general warned us, yes, he's a fascist. So what are we supposed to do, Joe? Not talk about conservative Republicans who are ideologically in alignment with Trump, who say, yeah, this guy's a problem, this guy's a fascist, this guy's sympathetic to dictators? Jesus fucking Christ.
All right. So according to Kyle Kulinski, we're supposed to take seriously an accusation that comes out 14 days or 10 days before an election for the president of the United States. And we're just supposed to say, yeah, nothing to see here. He said it. I believe it. Simple as that. Look, people all over the country have been telling lies about Donald Trump for years at this point, and they'll clearly do anything to make sure that he is not going to be reelected. That's why you have people like Liz Cheney out running around trying to get Kamala Harris elected. It's why you have Dick Cheney trying to get her elected. It's why you have John Bolton coming out and saying, yeah, I don't really like Donald Trump. Look, I don't like these people. These people are neocons who have dragged us into one conflict after another, and it's been absolute chaos. And Trump, for all of his many flaws, was at least trying to keep us out of new wars and trying to pull us out of the wars that we were involved in. Now, I'm sorry if Kyle Kulinski doesn't like that fact. I'm sorry if he doesn't like the fact that Trump used drones. But the reality is, we did not start any new wars under Trump, and these conflicts that we're getting involved with now, that happened under the Democrats. Those are the facts, whether you like them or not. Now, you're not out there pitching those facts. Instead, all you're doing is spraying tabloid nonsense. Well, this guy said that Trump's a big meanie. You can't take people like this seriously. And Kyle Kulinski is literally going to come out and say, well, maybe we should just go back to old media because new media just isn't covering it. This guy's a shell of his former self.
So if independent media, new media, wants to suck themselves off and act like, oh, we're special, we're great, we're better than mainstream media, you can't sit there and play fucking patty cakes with a guy like Donald Trump. But that's exactly what happened.
Well, there you have it, guys. You now have Kyle Kulinski coming out and saying that mainstream media is superior to independent media because they are less corrupt and the incentive structure is worse for independent media. This is fucking ridiculous. This guy can't be taken seriously because he's now dishonest. He's at the point where he's just going to parrot whatever MSNBC says. He's going to try to give you a little bit of flavor to it to make it seem like he's somehow drastically different. He isn't. Every election, he comes out and says, you need to go ahead and vote for the Democrat. He does this every single time. And don't give me that nonsense that, well, actually last time he voted for an independent candidate because he said that if you're in a swing state, then go ahead and vote for the Democrat. Yeah, the states that matter. He tells you if your vote matters, vote for the Democrat every time. He's a Democratic shill. Unfortunately, that's where we're at with Kyle Kulinski these days. And I think it's a real shame that we've lost Kyle Kulinski. But let me know what you guys think. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe and share the uncomfortable truths. Take care, everybody.